Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dylan, I'm your host. And today, guys, we are going to be talking about safety, all things safety. Again, I was back at the Illinois ABC conference this last week, their construction summit. And one of the things that I sat through was a safety briefing. So this guy did a lot of expert witness work for OSHA. I think was previously an OSHA inspector, and really just a huge wealth of knowledge. I was really impressed with this guy. And most safety guys, I'm not, like it's just usually not something that like is that impressive as you sit through. But this guy, huge wealth of knowledge, really great presentation, and talked about some of the biggest citations and all that kind of stuff that OSHA gives in a given year. And I thought it would be hugely beneficial to share with you guys so that you make sure that you don't do these things so that you're safe on your job sites. Everybody goes home and you don't get fined for it. So, with this, not a lawyer, not an OSHA inspector. So, do your own kind of research. And that's my uh, thing for today. But here are the most frequently cited serious violations in construction for the fiscal year of 2023 from OSHA. Number one was fall protection, especially in residential. So, like guys not being tied off, using ladders improperly, like all that kind of stuff was the most cited with 5,000 citations across the year, which is crazy. And these things are like pretty expensive. So as you do these, right, you can really add it up. But fall protection was number one in residential construction for most cited violations. Next was eye and face protection. Again, using like actual safety glasses. Um, it's pretty simple. Welding, helmets, all that kind of good stuff, but uh, simple eye protection, guys. Like just get your safety glasses. They're not that expensive. Um, for any of these violations, you could probably buy like, 100 pairs of safety glasses or more. So like go ahead and buy the safety glasses. Ladders was number three, not extended and 3 feet above the landing. So basically, like make sure that you face ladders, guys. Like pretty simple. And one thing that we'll go through here too is something that I think most of you aren't going to be aware of that need to be as we go through the rest of this list. So I'll just run through the rest of it. Fall protection, and then also training the guys that are exposed to fall hazards, head protection, fall protection. For the other one was unprotected sides and edges. Usually this is going to be in any of the scaffolds that you do, aerial lifts, fall protection while in the basket, general safety and health, inspection by a competent person. This could be anything from trenches to whatever else that you don't have a safety officer for your company. Fall protection, roofing, work on low sloped roofs and scaffolds. So again, like fall protection, basically being clipped in for anything, ladders, eye protection. So fall, eye, and like general safety, but those are the big ones, and then head protection. So with that, in the head protection, this was also making sure that you have like those, they almost look like rock climbing helmets, but where they have the chin strap, they've got the head and everything like that. Again, in a recent episode, you have 1 in 5 people are 55 and older within the industry. So really a fall could be just devastating for a lot of these guys off of something as simple as a ladder, where if they had that helmet that had the chin strap so that the helmet and hard hat stayed on their head, they would actually be a lot better. And again, any citation for this, you're looking at $100 hard hat. And the citations of these are $1,000 plus. So you could buy 10 or 100 or whatever number of hard hats for, one OSHA citation. So he also did this like hierarchy of interior work, and basically the most dangerous kind of thing, mobile scaffold, like basically don't use this. People die often. They reach over the bars. They don't lock the wheels. Um, there's there was a number of deaths last year alone with mobile scaffolds. So big problem in using those. Um, Aerial lifts, there were 15 deaths last year in the air. Um, and so a lot of this is, again, people not being tied off to the aerial lift. And this is the thing that I want to bring up with you guys is that you need to go and look through the safety requirements and actually the manufacturer's suggestions on any of this. So, for example, for a ladder, it says that you need to be facing the ladder at all times. Well, OSHA also says that in their requirements and guidelines that you need to adhere to all manufacturers' recommendations for safety items. So if that ladder on the side of it, on that, like, instructions for use, says that you need to be facing the ladder at all times, and you have a guy that is not facing the ladder at all times, well, now you're in violation of the manufacturer's recommendations, which then OSHA can cite you for that you're not following the way to use that piece of equipment. So like JLG has for all their scissor lifts that you will wear your harness. So even if OSHA has not come out with that rule, because JLG says it, then you need to clip in to every single JLG lift, because honestly, they were tired of people dying using their equipment and then people coming back on them. So you have to tie in, and for any time that you're going to use a JLG lift, you're going to wear a harness and you're going to clip in. Pretty simple. Um, any corrosion or anything on ladders or scaffolds needs to be fixed, right? Because every single um, scaffold and ladder is going to recommend that it not be put in use if it's corroded. And another simple thing for all of you general contractors out there is to have quizzes for people, like OSHA 10 type quizzes or whatever, before they go onto your job site, so that you can say that you were basically being safer and allowing people to come through, or you watch the video, then you have a little quiz, they sign it, and all that kind of stuff, and the sign-in sheet to watch the video and all this other stuff basically helps to protect you as a general contractor, in that you didn't allow people to come on your site that weren't trained in anything safety related. Um, Another one was like, does the equipment fit? Like, they had a picture of a guy and like a extra small harness, and the guy was double XL, right? Doesn't fit. So make sure that the equipment fits where you're at. And again, ladders are just going to be one of those things that are um, basically the most dangerous, right? Platform ladders, people start leaning too far once they're on it, anything like that. Um, if in an aerial lift and you tied off, in at least in 2023, there were no deaths with it. So that's really good. Um, but again, you need to make sure that any like scissor aerial lift that you're tied off. Um, Same with like lift pods, right? Instead of using a ladder, you're in an aerial lift. You're just going to have fewer deaths, fewer accidents on your job sites. And then the other thing that in newer pieces of equipment that they're starting to do is they're starting to paint these red lines on the ground. These lights basically are embedded within the pieces of equipment to keep people 2 feet away from like the aerial lifts, from fork trucks, all that kind of stuff. Again, the equipment manufacturers were getting tired of, basically getting sued because somebody ran over somebody's toes in operating a forklift or one of these lifts. So they actually have lights that go on the ground to basically tell people where to stand behind. But again, it'd be a safety thing for you and your folks on site to actually go over all this stuff. And that's why, like with Toolbox Talks, um, having these safety protocols to go over all this stuff with everybody that ever comes onto your job site, um, required to do any type of safety training, um, any training on ladders, any training on any of this stuff, you kind of have to go through and do. Now, moving forward in I guess really 25, And we'll see who gets put as the head of OSHA under the Trump administration, and we'll see how quickly that gets put in place. But really, the things that they're going to be emphasized over the next year are going to be falls. Again, just more people die from falling off of something, ladders, roofs, scaffolding, like whatever. They die from falling than pretty much anything else. There was actually quite a number of heat deaths last year. So as the temperatures rise, I actually have that. So uh, of all the heat deaths last year, when it got over 100 plus degrees, when the heat index was over 100 plus, this is where 59% of deaths occurred, and they were within 90 minutes. So basically, when it gets to be super hot, you need to start pulling people off of the job site in that 100 plus heat index, because again, within 90 minutes, which is a very short period of time, people can get heat stroke and die. So just be very aware of this once you get over 100 degrees. The other one was from 90 to 99 degrees. 35% were dead, and then 5% died at 80 plus. So, like, as you go through this, there is, it can still happen in 80 plus degree weather, but really, once the heat index climbs over 90, you need to start being very aware of this for your folks so that they don't get heat stroke, and basically notice all the signs. So you need to have some heat training and orientation probably at the beginning of summer, and a couple updates through this as it's getting um, hotter and hotter. So hexachrome. So if you're doing any of that welding, lead, silica, and then excavation and trenching, these are the big kind of national emphasis that you're going to have. So falls, heat, hexachrome, lead, silica, and excavation and trenching. Um, so a lot of like lead and silica stuff is if you're doing any dry cutting, you're going to get screwed. So make sure that you have, any concrete cutting you're doing, it's, you got a water hose right hooked up to the saw to do all that type of cutting, and you're taking it away. So, I mean, simple things that everybody should be clear with, excavation and trenching. Still seeing some trench deaths and that kind of thing, but falls are the big one. Make sure that you tie off as you get on ladders and that kind of stuff. So again, fall hazards pretty much even in your local emphasis programs, any building renovation and rehab that you're going to do is a local emphasis really in that North Midwest region. So Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Minnesota, I believe is all in that region. But basically any renovation rehab that you're doing things correctly, powered industrial vehicles again. So like fork trucks, things like that, that you're safe as you're operating them, fall hazards. They have grain handling, but high rise construction, making sure that this was super interesting. So one of the biggest things in like concrete forms, and guys were taking concrete forms like out of these high rises for supports and weren't properly supporting the floors above them as they move through. They were just like taking out forms and all this stuff. Is one of two things would happen. Guys didn't couldn't read blueprints. They could not read drawings. Uh, I wouldn't be shocked if some of these guys couldn't read. And I think, we think America, developed country, everybody can read, everybody's literate. When that's not truly the case, like there's still going to be some people that are frankly illiterate. They can't read and they're embarrassed to say such. So you really got to make sure that people can read drawings, at least read blueprints and understand what's going on. And then number two was a lot of these guys, they just didn't know how to use the computer. They couldn't print off drawings. They couldn't get access to these things. And frankly, it's because they didn't know how to use the computer, or iPad, or whatever, in order to read this type of stuff. So as silly as it might be, you're going to have to kind of check on a lot of these guys that are coming onto your sites that are working through this because they might not be able to read stuff. You got to have some quizzes and tests to check these guys and understand, their competency level and just reading drawings. So super important, guys, as you kind of move through this. Like you got to check some of these basic things that maybe in the past we didn't really check, or we just assumed. Anymore, you just can't make those assumptions. There was a lot of that for this for high rise construction, especially that this guy was talking about in Chicago. Um, but again, don't be surprised that if it happens in your area as well. So a lot of this was pretty big. It's like, dang, guys couldn't either read the drawings or get access to them or anything like that. And it created some big hazards in these buildings. So make sure that you're taking kind of account of it. So um, if OSHA were to come on your site and request it, make sure that you have kind of a plan in place. Reach out to, if you're a member of like ABC or Union Hall or whatever, that you have basically a plan in place for how you're going to respond to any OSHA visit, any OSHA request for information, how you're going to handle that. Deal maybe council might be able to help with some of this as well, but to have what you're going to do about any of their inquiries and documentation. Here's all the reports that we have. Here's all the sign-in sheets. Here's all the stuff, right? So any disciplinary actions that you took on guys, and a lot of this could be as simple as retraining, right? Disciplinary action just means that, hey, guy didn't know how to drive a fork truck. We're going to retrain him on fork truck. Here's his certificate that he passed his recertification to drive a fork truck. And you go through all of that again with the guy. So you don't necessarily have to fire them, but you do have to take some type of corrective action, right? He's going to leave the job site today for not wearing the right boots. His boots have holes in them. Bob's leaving the job site today, right? If OSHA shows up and guy doesn't have good boots on, hey, you're going home today, right? It's that simple. We'll get you some boots or whatever your policy is around that type of stuff. Or hey, wear boots that don't have holes in them tomorrow when you come back. So simple things like that is making sure that you have those. The other thing that this guy went over is in OSHA interviews. So if somebody were to get injured or anything like that on your site, that individual needs his own counsel. So they can't use the company attorney. That's a real big conflict of interest. That's a big no-no. So the individual, would need their own counsel, but it cannot be company's counsel. And then management, whenever they have an interview with OSHA, can use the company attorney, right? Because they're acting in the company's interest. But the individual that was hurt or injured cannot use company counsel because that's just a big conflict of interest. So avoid anything casual. Again, have counsel there. And avoid saying, I don't know, like get your counsel there, have the information available to answer these questions. But again, tell the truth. But again, get them counsel, right? Everything is on record, and don't engage in idle conversations around safety with OSHA. Do that all via counsel. So those are the kind of big things to go over, because again, with OSHA and safety, like we want everybody to come home at night, and the whole OSHA book and violations and all this is written in blood, right? Somebody has died or gotten hurt or injured somewhere, and that's why we have all of these rules that now basically form OSHA. So super important. Other thing now, I believe this is still the case, and we'll see again once Trump takes office what'll happen, but nothing over 6 months. So if an accident happened 6 months ago or greater, it can't be investigated. So if it happened 7 months ago, it can't be investigated. So OSHA is going to have to react and respond to any request or thing basically as soon as possible, because if it's longer than 6 months ago, we're no longer basically required to keep records on. I mean, you still should keep records on that kind of stuff, but with that, it's basically that, hey, if you weren't in compliance 6 months ago, that doesn't mean that you're not in compliance today. So the bottom line of this is be compliant, do all the things that you need to with OSHA. Documentation is your friend as you move through a lot of this, because again, we want to make sure that we're doing all the things that we need to and adhering to all the rules as we go. A couple more kind of interesting things is Like if you are willful in any of the safety violations and you show like willful negligence, it basically 10x's your fines to OSHA, which is kind of insane. But again, it's putting these fines and monetary pieces in place to basically help you to adhere to these safety standards. Um, Once a month is to do an audit of your people, right? Make sure like you most of us we don't look at people's shoes, but hey, good boots. Um, and then if OSHA shows up and they're not wearing good boots, like, hey, he's going home today. Um, so there were 100 amputations last year. Um, on job sites, which is just insane. But like go get the guard for the chop saws or any saw, table saw, chop saw. Like make sure that you have guards for this. No fingers within 6 inches. Like again, this follows manufacturer's recommendations that like, hey, this table saw we sold it with a guard. It needs to have a guard on it. You can't not do it. A lot of this stuff now for like a circular saw, you got to have both hands on it. So that means you're going to have clamps, you're going to have a board, and then you're going to have to use two hands with that circular saw. So if somebody cuts off their hand with a circular saw because they weren't using two hands to operate it, it is now that not only is that a $3,200 fine, but you got a guy without a hand or a finger or whatever because he cut it off because he was only using one hand in operating the circular saw. So pretty big, deal here, guys. Like get some clamps, get some stuff. You can buy a lot of clamps for $3,200 to hold those boards to use that circular saw. And I know a lot of you guys have been using these things forever, but it's manufacturer's recommendations for a reason. Because again, you got 100 amputations a year. You're gonna like want a guard, want to put some of this stuff in place so you don't lose a finger or a thigh or whatever it might be, a toe. Um, and then with OSHA, if you do have an accident, if there is something that happens on your job sites, you do need to make a call. You do need to talk to somebody at OSHA, again, have counsel, all that kind of good stuff with you, and have a relationship with these guys. There's nothing worse than not having a relationship, not having um, something, having something go down, not having a good working relationship with these folks, and then having to go through everything that OSHA does. So, and again, you can have your company counsel. The employee cannot have the company attorney. Like they need to have their own counsel because otherwise it would be a conflict of interest. And then monthly training, right? Like do some with your managers and folks, like for OSHA 10 or OSHA 30, like there's, I think 13, 14 topics. So pick a topic a month. And this month we're talking about, whatever it might be, right? Guards on saws or lockout tag out or what have you in all of these areas of training so that you can do a kind of monthly training and review for all of your managers, all your site superintendents, all your foremen, and then keep a sign-in sheet for all of this so that you can keep records. Because one of the things is that OSHA asks is like, hey, here's a sign-in sheet, and then if a guy attends it, goes to it, and he's like, oh yeah, no, I fell asleep. Well, it's not our fault that you don't give a shit about your safety and you fell asleep during the training. Like it was offered, it was there. Like that's the whole point of this training is so that you know, take this seriously because it's all about your life and keeping you safe. So if you don't care and you fell asleep, well, that's not, the company's problem or you. Uh, and if you don't enforce this stuff and you can't say that your guy was ultimately an idiot, if you don't, do these retrainings, if you don't offer all this safety training, if you don't retrain, coach, all that kind of stuff. These guys, again, if they're an idiot, like you don't have to fire them, but retrain them, put them back through all the stuff. Because again, we need to retain, we need to recruit, we need to bring people in, have a culture of safety. And at the same time, like understand guys do make mistakes. Maybe it's been a while since they've been on this piece of equipment. So retraining is good. Don't treat that as a bad thing, but understand like, hey, these guys need to go back through it. You can probably make light of it depending on the guy. But again, understanding that like, hey, we're trying to make everybody better here. We're trying to keep everybody safe. And if they do have a problem, then make sure that they go through retraining and and get some improvements as you go through this. So again, we don't want to skimp on safety. It's a huge thing. It's something that everybody needs to be aware of, and again, have all these kind of documentation pieces in place for all of your safety training, your monthly meetings, have your sign-in sheet, make a copy of it, put it digitally somewhere on your servers, back it up so that you have all this stuff in case there is an accident on one of your job sites, so that again, you're covered, you know what you did, and you can help your guys move forward to be safe with all their projects. So guys, safety is extremely huge. We want everybody to go home safe every day with all their fingers and toes. So make sure that you're following those manufacturer recommendations on all the equipment that you're using. That goes from tools to ladders to lifts, fork trucks, everything that you might be operating on your job sites. Be safe, follow that criteria, and make sure that everybody goes home at the end of the day. So guys, that's this episode of the Construction Corner podcast. Until next time.